Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? Tell me about yourself.
Well, thanks, Nate. I appreciate you inviting me. So my name is Mark Baisley, and what I do primarily these days, I represent 8 counties in the Colorado State Senate.
Okay.
So, but I'm who I am. Well, so I'm a husband of 47 years to my
Wow.
high school sweetheart.
Congratulations, man.
Well,
How old
yeah.
were you when you got married?
We were 23.
Okay.
And yeah,
What's the secret?
um, that's a good question. My son asked me that same question. I go, I don't think I got the good answers, but I don't know. I just fell madly in love on my 16th birthday when she crashed my party,
Oh,
my
no.
birthday party, and it hasn't let up since. So, yeah, just respect, I guess.
Mhm.
But we're commanded to love our wives, and so that's not hard when your wife is Mary Ann. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I like that you speak highly of her. Maybe that's one of the secrets too. I know a lot of men and women, actually a lot of women too, that when they're not around their wives but with their friends, they'll talk negatively about their significant others, and I feel like that just sows division. And even if they don't hear what you said about them, it creates an energy, in the relationship.
That makes the cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Mary Ann she's an amazing person, really remarkable person. She's an artist. I'm an aerospace engineer.
Okay.
And so, maybe if we hadn't met in high school, we might not have connected, might not have got together. But
Yeah.
but it works well.
Would you say that the kind of traditional gender roles are well defined in your marriage? Did she have a career? Was she more of a stay-at-home mom? And how did you kind of find that balance?
Yeah, and that is a good question, because there was some figuring out, especially early on in our marriage, because we were not making much money, either one of us, and so just trying to make the ends meet. And then when the kids started coming along, how do you balance that? Because she has her degree in graphic art design, so she's an artist, wants to be a professional artist.
Yeah.
And so she did want to work, and so I was working full time necessarily, and enjoying it. I was working for NASA back then, and as an aerospace engineer when things really started going for me well in my career, and she would have loved to do more career work now, but she was a great mom. Just so we had 2 kids originally, 2 kids that we made in the usual way, and then two more that we bought cheap, as we like to say.
Okay. Adoption, I assume, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was actually, we never adopted them. These were like foster kids that just but unofficial. We never involved the government. It was just 2 kids that needed a home, sisters that were friends of my daughters in high school, and they had a pretty terrible home situation. Alcoholic dad beating up one of the girls, and so when they fled, they ended up at our house and just kind of never left. Came over for Thanksgiving dinner and then stayed.
Wow.
So,
they must have felt safe around you.
Yeah.
At least.
That was the blessing was ours. So I mean they've been part of the family for a long time, and now their kids call me grandpa and they call me dad, and yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
I forget which are the two,
Well, okay. I feel like it ties into kind of abortion. That's a different topic, but the adoption process, I feel like if there's something that the government, I'm not a huge fan of government subsidies, but if you're going to subsidize something or make something free, I feel like the adoption process should be one of them. And also, not relaxing standards necessarily, but making it easier for qualified couples to adopt. I know amazing families that have to wait a long time for that process to go through. Even after there's a connection already made, I feel like there could be something that could be done about the adoption process, making it more streamlined. Obviously, you want the quality of the family and the parents to remain intact. You don't just want to let anyone who wants a child, to adopt necessarily, but should definitely be an easier or at least a quicker process.
Yeah.
And I don't think you should have to pay for a child. The idea of purchasing a child doesn't sound, it doesn't sit right. It doesn't sit
Yeah.
right. It doesn't.
No,
I feel like it should be free,
yeah.
but it should be to parents that have really a good, strong track record that can raise the child well. Anyway.
What a good point though you're making, because yeah, people spend a whole lot of money in sometimes a lot of overseas adoptions and so on. They will really put out a lot to have children, especially if they can't biologically have their own children. Then they go through quite a bit. You know, what's funny is every now and then in the state legislature, we'll consider bills that will modify whatever the existing law is on adoption and foster and all that. And so I engage in those conversations, but then I realize, you know what? We didn't do any of this stuff. It was just, my wife has always wanted someone at the dinner table on Thanksgiving who could use a meal. So we've had some interesting characters over the years.
Wow. Yeah.
And sometimes it's a whole family. Sometimes it's just someone that's hurting or lonely. And so we've done that traditionally. And then that was a year when our daughter said, I have someone for Thanksgiving this year. And so she tells us about her two friends and their home situation. And that's as far as it went officially. I had my 5 rules, which was a kind of a funny moment. 5 rules that I would tell my kids on their way out the door when they're going out with their friends or on a date. I'd tell them, no sex, no drugs, no cultish activity, don't break the law. And see, well, I'm trying to remember what the 5th one was, but anyway, but I had my rules. So
Yeah.
so it became a routine and almost kind of a joke. As they were going out the door, I'd go, bye.
Yep.
You know that?
Yep.
And
my parents always said, don't forget who you are, meaning like, we have a last name to uphold,
yeah. Well,
Similar thing.
when the 2 girls came over for Thanksgiving, and then we planned that when everybody else went home, we were gonna sit and talk with them about maybe them staying, and then they never left. We had that conversation, and they moved in that night. But it was I said, okay, listen, you're not going to be staying here as a hotel. This is not going to be your hostel for you to come kick back for a while and come and go. I said,
Right.
you'd be part of this family.
Yeah.
I said, in fact, I have these 5 rules. And they go, oh, we know them. No sex, no drugs, no. And they just rattled them off. I go, you know my rules? They go, oh yeah, Kim says them all the time.
That's great. Well,
so they
it
fit
sounds
right
like
in my way.
Yeah, it's definitely ingrained in them, is what it sounds like. And also, when you're a teenager, it's like, okay, Dad, yeah, no sex, whatever. But once you're in your 20s and 30s and you're looking back, you're so thankful and appreciative for parents like that. Parents that have rules and guidelines for your life. A parent that just gives their kid a phone when they're 6 years old and then just, go have fun, do what you want. It's like, I don't know. That style of parenting has never really appealed to me. I have 3 kids of my own.
Hey, nice.
So, I'm still thinking about, how am I going to parent them when they're teenagers,
Yeah.
But, okay, so you mentioned that you're an aerospace engineer and that you work for NASA. Tell me a little bit about that. Had you always been interested in that? And how did you land a job with NASA?
Yeah.
It's like every kid's dream.
Totally. Let me mention a big dream moment for me and all of that too. So sure, I was working in computers back in the 70s when computers were.
They had computers back then?
Believe it or not.
kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just messing
They were
with you.
powered by a garden hose, but back then. Yeah, and I was just doing delivery work for a data center, and they gave me a scholarship to go to computer trade schools, and so I learned programming languages, and it was not an interest of mine really, but I took to it. I just when the math of it. I was back in high school. I was the math nerd, while my wife was the homecoming queen. And so, when I got into the math of it, that really intrigued me. The binary arithmetic and thinking in octal and hexadecimal and all was just, I don't know, excited my brain. So I got into that, and eventually I ended up specializing in the cybersecurity piece. We didn't even call it cybersecurity way back then in the late 70s, early 80s. But I was working for the engineering firm that my dad worked for nearly 30 years. And,
Okay.
And they had a big data center. And when I became a cybersecurity guy and started giving talks on it, at conferences. And I got hired by NASA effectively in the elevator after one of my talks.
Okay.
They came there looking for someone that knew this stuff.
Right. So you didn't even
So
apply. It wasn't like you saw a job opening
right,
or wow.
right. It was just like, hey, my name is Missy Doran, and I'd like to talk to you about it. So I had two people, get on the elevator with
So
me.
they recruited you.
Yeah,
That's
so
pretty awesome.
it was awesome, and it was an amazing job. And so it was at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, is where I was working, and it's NASA's deep space exploration branch. And so it's, if you've seen the movie The Martian.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
Matt Damon,
Matt
right?
Damon, yeah. So all the stuff on the ground on the Earth was taking place at Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So,
Okay.
yeah. Anyway,
That's cool.
yeah. And
Are UFOs real?
I'm sorry.
Are UFOs real?
I don't believe so.
Really?
Yeah. I don't
Even
think so.
after seeing like the Pentagon, they've released I think 2 or 3 videos, like radar data and infrared footage. No, not convinced by that. Huh?
I actually haven't looked at those
Okay.
videos. I should, but no. You know what? I look at what is the likelihood for life to exist anywhere.
I
So,
would think pretty high, right?
well, there's evidence that life does exist because we experience
here.
it here. But if you think about how the universe came into play, and if you accept the Big Bang Theory, which I do, then everything, all matter came from a single point, and in fact, as it exploded, it scattered not just matter itself, but it scattered space. So space didn't even exist until the 3 dimensions of space, until that expanded. And then all that matter, as it would coalesce through attraction, or what we call gravity, as all of those would come together, then in our solar system, the solar system used to look like Saturn looks now, where it was a rings of debris around a collection of. Are we getting too nerdy?
No, you're
here?
good. I'm enjoying this, honestly.
Right.
I'm very fascinated right now.
Okay, so just the debris around of matter around the most prevalent molecule, which is hydrogen. So hydrogen is the most prevalent molecule in the universe.
Okay.
And that's, most things are, most matter is. And so as that, as all those molecules of hydrogen, hydrogen were collecting, that compressed so much that it explodes into a nuclear fission reaction, but the gravity is holding it together while it's exploding outward, and that's that perfect spherical shape of the sun. Okay. So that is the sun, which is just
star creation.
Yeah, it's a star, which is just a constant nuclear fusion explosion. But circling around that in that same spin that all that matter comes into, because it doesn't come in uniformly in all directions. It comes down, a little bit offset, so it goes into a spin.
Okay.
Which creates all that orbit, and everything above and the polar sides, they just fall right down. But anything else that's got centrifugal force about it is spinning around. And after a long period of time, then all of that matter starts to coalesce, just attraction through gravity, just as all molecules will attract with each other. And so the heavier molecules are closer because they're
the center, right?
Yeah, so that's where we get our rock planets. So the 4 rock planets. So those are the closer ones, and then the gas planets are the ones out there because it's lighter, material.
Okay.
Okay, and just consider all of that happened, and as it used to look like the rings of Saturn, all the planets did, but after a lot of time, they started collapsing into each other, and then formed the planets that we have now. Okay, just consider how that all took billions of years to finally happen. And then life appeared. But as we've discovered in studying DNA, life has instruction. So our blood knows to carry this material to be the fingernail or the heart, or wherever that DNA, wherever that cell lands, it becomes what it's supposed to be in its surrounding. And all of that amazing instruction, one that becomes a lizard, one that becomes a peacock and human and all that,
Right.
that's very specific code. And in fact, someone who I highly respect named, last name Marshall, I'll think of his first name. Anyway, he wrote a book called Evolution 2.0, where he's a software guy like me, but as he studied DNA, he realized that DNA is not simply instruction, it's also software.
Okay.
And all that junk DNA that we've heard talk about that's just useless DNA left over from evolution, as they say, he says, no, that's not junk. It's error code. It's how we know to adapt to our surroundings. It's useful. It's software. Because here's how we write that software. And all that to say that if you think about in the whole explosion of the Big Bang and the coalescing of matter that becomes planets, at what point did instruction get included in all that?
Right. It seems like there would have to have been a designer.
Has to have been a designer.
Yeah.
So my conclusion is it happened where we can observe it here on Earth, life. If it happened somewhere else, then that same designer put it there. But otherwise, I assume it doesn't exist.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does.
That's
but
my long answer to your short
no,
question.
you're good. That was a great answer. I loved it. No, but I feel like, well, let me just say it like this. I'm open-minded to the idea that there are, other planets that have life. And it wouldn't, at least for me personally, it would not shake my faith in God if, aliens were proven to exist. Yeah, I still, for me, it doesn't change the fundamental reality of that Jesus, at least for the human race, Jesus was the mechanism by which God saved our souls.
Yeah.
And so, there could have been a different story that played out on a different planet, or maybe those beings don't have souls. Maybe they're just highly advanced animals, basically. I don't know, but okay, that's interesting.
But did God so love Andromeda that he gave his only begotten son over there too? I mean, come on.
I don't know. Maybe it's written a little differently, but okay, interesting. Well, okay, so you're running for governor. Hard segue here. You're running for governor. What the heck is wrong with you? Why would you do that? My goodness. What inspired you to do that?
Yeah. That's an even more difficult explanation than DNA appearing on an otherwise lifeless planet. Well,
that's funny.
So, I mentioned when we were first talking, I grew up living around a lot of places. So, and Puerto Rico was my teen years where I met my wife, and I lived in South Africa for a brief time after that. And when you're living away from the United States, you appreciate the United States. The U.S. is an amazing place, and it's amazing because of the summer of 1776. What the founders gave us in the Declaration of Independence, documented there, is stunning.
Yeah.
And I was attending this all-boys boarding school in Puerto Rico, which is an amazing school run by the Benedictine monks of Humacao, and I made some snotty comment at the age of 15 about missing the good old US of A and what a better place than this stinkhole island was, And I said that to my buddy Raul Acosta. I remember saying that to him.
This was why you're in Puerto Rico, you said?
Huh. Yeah.
It is kind of part of the U.S. a little
bit.
In a way.
Yep. Yeah, it's a different culture,
right.
but yes, a Commonwealth of the U.S., right? And they are, if you're born in Puerto Rico, you have U.S. citizenship. So yeah, but I wasn't appreciating it. Wasn't appreciating it until I met this gorgeous brunette, on my 16th
That'll
birthday.
change your mind a little.
It totally changed everything. So this was like a year prior to that, and I made some comment to Raul, and one of the priests goes walking by, and I knew that he heard what I said, and it was a typically inappropriate 15-year-old comment.
Yeah.
And he turns to me and says, "You're right, Mr. Baisley. Your nation's a special place, and if you want to understand why, you'll go read your founding document." And at Colegio San Antonio Abad, that meant, and I will quiz you when I see you tomorrow in the hallway on what you read.
Okay.
So I just looked at Raul and I said, I got to go to the library. And
Yeah, he put you to the test.
he did. So I scurried down to the library, and I remember walking in and asking the librarian, I need to see the founding document of America, please. And I didn't know what I was asking for, but he did. So he brings me the Declaration of Independence, and it was within some big book that he plopped down on a study desk for me to read. And when I read it, it was like the skies opened and the angels sang. I was like going, this is it. This is the magic. And the words that struck me so hard were the ones right after the ones that we all have memorized. Right after we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And the next phrase is, governments are instituted among men to secure these rights, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So the very purpose of government is in our founding document. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So that just seared in my head and heart at that moment. And I just appreciated what America was and what it was created to be. And to imagine these founders that were breaking away from the crown, and it starts out, the whole declaration starts out saying, hey, look, King George, we're getting a divorce, sorry, but then the next thing in that first opening paragraph says that we're going to establish this new nation on the laws of nature and of nature's God. That's how it says it right there.
Yep.
So natural law.
Right.
And then goes on to describe the source of our rights and then the purpose of government. So just thinking about all that made me think I when I get big and hopefully living back in the good old US of A one day, I want to work to preserve that. Mm-hmm. So it was really just a series of coincidences, or not, as those things go, that I got to know a customer of mine, my first company that I started. She and I would always get involved or get engaged in this political conversation at the end of my workday when I'm working at her site.
Sure.
And
did she agree with you or not agree?
Yeah,
with you?
yeah.
Oh,
She
okay,
was.
okay.
Yeah, she was staunch conservative, and her name was Mary Schaefer. And she says to me one day, you know what, you probably should go through the Republican leadership program here in Colorado.
Is that the leadership program of the Rockies?
Yes.
LPR. Okay,
yes.
I'm familiar with those
now
guys.
Now known as leadership program of the Rockies. That's
Okay.
right. So this was in 1995.
Wow.
And I said, well, cool. She says, I'll have my husband.
Bob?
No.
Was it Bob? No.
it was
okay.
but it was a congressman. And I did
Got you.
a guy named Dan Schaefer, who was Tom Tancredo's predecessor way back then in the 90s. Yeah, spelling a little bit different of Schaefer. But yeah, and I knew who
Were they still
Dan
making
Schaefer
you
was.
read Ayn
Or
Rand?
Ayn Rand?
Yeah.
No, that was pre Ayn Rand.
Okay.
It was very principled and all that. But anyway, that just kind of got me involved in the party, and then all of a sudden I'm
Well, I'll tell you what, if you don't get inspired when you read the Declaration of Independence, I don't know what will. I mean, and when people say that it's not a Christian nation or wasn't founded by Christians, that they were deists, they weren't Christians. Well, first of all, it's just factually not true.
Agreed.
But no, it really does feel, and maybe this is just my patriotism coming out, but it feels like a divine document when you read it. It just does. And it feels like the grace of God has been on this country. But I was going to say, I think for me, one of the most special things about the founding of the nation was that a lot of kind of Western countries claim to be democratic or republic, or claim to be kind of by and for the people. I think that you actually cannot make that claim unless you have a constitutional right to defend yourself against a tyrannical government.
Amen to that. Yes.
Because if you don't have that, then you're actually not governed by the people. You're governed by the government.
That's right.
And the definition, actually, at least the definition that I learned in political science of government, is the organization within a defined border that has a monopoly on the legitimate use of force. And the monopoly part stands out to me because in the United States, it's one of... It might even be exceptional, but there might be one other country that actually does have a constitutional right to overthrow the government if they become tyrannical. And so in the United States, the government actually does not have a monopoly on the legitimate use of force, but it's shared with the citizenry,
Yeah.
which to me is like so special.
Yes.
And that will always be at least one check. It's almost like a fourth branch of government, frankly, is the people. It's a check on the executive power, the legislature, all that. So anyway, but yes, I 100% agree with you. Like, that to me is a sufficient answer to run just reading the founding documents alone.
Well, yeah. And in fact, what gives me hope in all that, and as you can imagine, in this very blue state, as it's called now, I mean, the Republican Party does not have the majority in the House, nor the Senate, nor the governor's office. But so I get a lot of, well, a Republican can't win, the conservative worldview cannot win, and so on. And the reason I don't believe that to be the case is because if our nation was founded on natural law, then as we move away from natural law and move towards the more Marxist worldview, as we have been marching towards in Colorado for at least 12 years, but I mean, the other side of the aisle has had control of all three legs of the stool, their House, Senate, and governor's office for 10 years now. But I have to believe that natural law is a forever thing. It's something that will appeal to people, at least eventually.
Yeah.
That when they do things wrong long enough and go, I'm not enjoying the results of this.
Right.
You know what? That natural law message makes a lot of sense to me, especially at this point when crime is going nuts, when we're being overrun by folks that were not invited into the country in the first place, and we have the gangs and
Right.
and homeless, and they'll remember, and they do, and I hear it all the time. Remember, you go, when I first moved to Colorado, or I was born here in Colorado, and I have watched this happen. And after a while, they're going to go, you know what? I think maybe what's wrong is we've been entrusting the rule of the government we've been entrusting the government to rule instead of entrusting the government to serve us. So I'm counting on that happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know there were this recent session just ended.
Yeah.
There were two pretty big ones that stood out to me, bills that got passed. It was the gun bill, it was a 003, I think, and then the trans the kids bill is what I'm calling it.
Yep. 1312.
Which freaks me out because I'm actually going through a custody battle myself right now with my third child.
Oh my.
And I mean, I don't think she would do this, but it does concern me that she could theoretically just kind of say like, oh, your son is a girl now, and by the way, and if you don't agree, then I get to just have full custody and you don't get to see your kid anymore.
Yeah.
That really concerns me as a parent. The fact that the state can just come in and take your child away. Actually, they're forcing you to lie. They're forcing you to tell a blatant lie to your child and impose a 40% suicide rate on your child. And the fact that they're just, I don't know. For me, I think Republicans, it wouldn't pass. I think Republicans in the legislature should, whenever the next session starts, propose a bill that says children cannot consent to sexual decisions. And I think that genital mutilation and hormones and chemical castration drugs, I think that would fall under the sexual umbrella.
Yeah.
Because you are permanently impacting your reproductive system when you go through that kind of stuff. I think two things would either happen. Either it would pass, and great, then Republicans get what they want, or it would be denied, and Democrats would have to defend the idea that children can make sexual decisions for themselves. Because that's what this precedent eventually leads to. And, you have, like, what do they call them? Like, minor attracted persons is what they're calling them now for pedophiles.
Oh, my.
That's, like, the politically correct way to say.
They made a soft name for it.
So I don't know. I think even when Republicans are in a minority, you can still put Democrats on the defense, I think, just by proposing certain things, forcing them to defend indefensible ideas.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I'll throw it back to you, but what are your thoughts about this recent session that just ended, and how, what are the steps? How can we knock some sense into the Colorado voter, and people will vote for you and that you might actually win?
Yeah. So interesting to me that you brought up those two bills, Senate Bill 003, House Bill 1312, because it occurred to me recently, and I posted this on social media, that Senate Bill 003 is in support of House Bill 1312. Because
Okay.
Senate
Yeah.
Bill 003 is an attempt to take away your right to defend your household. And 1312 is the state getting between the parent and the child. So that's one in support of the other. It's insidious.
It's a complementary bill.
Complementary bill.
That's interesting.
And not one that even the Democrats who proposed them, I don't think it occurred to them that these are complementary bills, but the larger scheme that is that constant march of the rebellious worldview, and I call it that because there's the natural law and then there's the rebellion against natural law, but that is a constant march, and it's not something that we win and we like, okay, cool, we established the United States of America, or we got Florida as a solid red state. No, we have to tend our garden. The weeds will constantly grow and constantly grow, and if you're not paying attention and taking care of those as they prop up, then after a while you just realize, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by these weeds. They've overtaken my garden, and that's what has happened here in Colorado. And I don't think it's too late for us to weed them out and to return back. But
Yeah.
so this past session, and the nightmare is over, I said right after we claimed, voted sine die, which is we're wrapping it up for the year on the 120th day of the session. It was like the rest have been, but a little more calm. 1312 in particular it ended up not quite as awful as it started. Now the insidiousness behind it is still there, but the blatant conversation, the blatant words in there that said, if a parent does not address their child with the gender and the name that the child wants to be called, then they can lose custody of that child. That language was taken out.
Okay.
So what's remained in there, and by the way, that bill, like 90% of the bill got lifted out.
Okay.
So
what is the operative language in there right now? What does it really do?
It's still considered discriminatory language for you to refer to anyone as the gender or name that they don't want to be called.
So it sounds like it maybe mostly now applies to kind of employment, like a workplace environment.
Yeah, but it doesn't exclude minors.
Okay.
In that. So watch the weeds,
Right.
and as was a warning given to me, say, hey, before 1312 even became a conversation, parents have lost their children in a custody battle because they did not address them by the gender and name that they preferred. So we have to be on the wary all the time anyway.
Right.
I wish you the best in your own custody. And by the way, it's worth mentioning also, in 1312, the original language, it said that you could lose custody of your child, but it didn't mention divorce proceedings. A court could simply step in, even in a solid marriage.
That's interesting.
It is, and it's frightening. So we're pointing that out. But when we were fighting back on that one, and the people turned out in a big way with like 600 people signing up to testify against. So
that's great.
That's what did the job to whack it back to what it was in the end. And I pray that the governor would have the wisdom to veto it. But anytime one of these bills starts out horrible and gets softened, he signs it into law.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe at least it's not as bad as it could have been, but still not great.
Exactly. That's
kind of how to sum it up there.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you had mentioned that. By the way, how much time do we have here? Can't remember what time is it.
It's 2:39.
2:39. Okay. Got 10 or 15 minutes. So you had mentioned that uh, people have said to you that a Republican can never win in Colorado. What is your answer to those people? I mean, what are the actual like steps? What is the messaging required? Like boots on the ground, like
Yeah,
strategy, like walk me through what you know how you can pull this off.
sure. So there's a couple things that give us hope now. One is, as we talked about, people are seeing the results of the votes that we've been making as a state, and it's not good. There's some real awfulness happening, and that we're living with now, results of those decisions. We also had some wins this past election, 2024. We gained 3 seats in the House, and that got us out of the super minority position in the House. Also, right up here with Gabe Evans, we won that. We flipped one congressional
Right.
seat. So
Big deal.
It is a very big deal. Colorado now has 4 Democrat U.S. representatives and 4 Republican U.S.
Yep.
representatives. Now, both of our U.S. Senate seats are Democrat, but we have a perfect balance when it comes to Congress. So that gives me some hope. And then an article and study just came out like a week ago that said the polling that was recently done that the article was based on said things are not looking good for the Democrats lately, and that their image that is held of them by the population in Colorado is not popular. So I'm thinking we hopefully have the timing now that in 2026, 18 months from now, or
Yep.
that folks are finally going to be ready to put a conscience back in place. So when we have single party rule, which we have had now for 10 years, then there is no conscience. There's something passes in the House, passes in the Senate, goes to the governor. The Conservative Party cannot stop it. So it only gets stopped when they scare themselves that they've gone too far, and the governor goes, I better veto this thing.
Right.
So we have to have a conscience in place. And I think people will listen to reason and say, yeah, I need to have some balance in there. So that's, the conversation was first brought to me because frankly, this was not an aspiration of mine to do, but a lot of conversation with folks. What's important to me is the utilitarian aspect of government, to create opportunity, to create the infrastructure for commerce so that people can thrive in their careers, have the dignity of work, support themselves and their families, and then have something left over to support those around them that are in need. But what government has become is more of an imposition of a belief system. Frankly, it's how the state has become the church. So when it comes to like a House Bill 1312, that's not maintaining the roads. That's not maintaining communication lines and so on. That is asserting a belief system onto the families.
Okay.
So you think about what's the purpose of government? Well, it's to secure our rights. It's not to give us our belief system. And so I'm hoping that people will relate to that and go, yeah, it's time that we get back to what, frankly, Baisley's been working on for a long time. So the things that I've been working on is bringing jobs to Colorado. So I've worked to get Colorado through a bill that I ran a couple of years ago to get us qualified for what's called the CHIPS Act. So the federal government wants to bring semiconductor manufacturing from China back to the U.S. because we can't trust the Trojan horses the Chinese will put into semiconductors. And so we got Colorado qualified. That was a win. The big win about 13, 14 months ago that I was the Senate prime sponsor on the bill that One Colorado. We had a big bake-off against other states. We won the designation of Colorado being the tech hub for quantum computing.
Okay.
A really big deal.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So we invested as a Republican. This is hard to swallow, but the minimum investment from the state to qualify was $74 million. So I carried the bill to invest $74 million of Colorado's money towards $1 billion in return from the federal government.
Yep.
And so it's all focused around the University of Colorado. It has an amazing physics lab. But quantum computing companies are moving in, and new companies are springing out. So we now have this clean laser company. We have a cryogenics company that keeps the environment freezing cold inside of the quantum computers. And this is just the next generation of computers, phenomenal things that are happening.
Yeah.
Harnessing quantum physics in ways that you have to accept and not try to understand, because it's beyond our reason.
Well, I was about to ask, I mean, how well versed are you in quantum computing? I'm not at all, but do you know much about it?
I know, yeah. So I've been working with the quantum computing companies and with University of Colorado quite a bit, and I've listened to books like the Quantum for Dummies kind of thing,
Okay.
to try to. But Richard Feynman's speeches. He was an incredible physicist from Caltech from many years ago. But his lectures are on YouTube, and so I listen to all these, and I read, and I hang out with these quantum physics engineers and so on. And I'm trying to understand it. But what I've finally concluded is, as you model matter all the way from the chemistry of life, the periodic table of elements, and then you can see how through the weights and how they coalesce, how they collect to become the different molecules, and how they can transform from one molecule to another molecule and so on. If you dive down deeper and deeper into what's within the molecule and those components, but at some point when you cross the threshold over into quantum physics, nothing makes sense anymore. It doesn't follow the rules of the larger set. So
Okay.
you
Superposition.
Superposition.
I know that word.
Yeah, superposition. Yeah. Yes, that's right. But it becomes a matter of accepting it. Accepting because it's been proven through cause and effect, experiments and so on. And you just have to accept that that's reality, and then leverage it.
Is it like powered by electricity? What's happening in this? What is the hardware for a quantum computer? What's going on?
Oh yeah, fascinating. So they will actually move protons around within a vacuum chamber. The vacuum chamber is a cylinder like about this big,
Okay.
and they suck out everything out of it except for they leave a tiny bit of one element in their scrunchia that they leave in there. They're able to move those particles around on a track, and that's their, instead of ones and zeros like we have in a classic computer, this is instead of having a state of on or off binary, this is it's either on or it's off. It's one or two or both. And so with that third dimension, then you can do more massive calculations through it, and it's moved, and the particles are moved around by a laser. So that's why this new clean laser technology that's made by an amazing company and a small company, but they make amazing stuff in Golden, and they operate within that vacuum, but that vacuum is brought down to near 0 degrees through the cryogenics from another company that is in Denver.
How are they able to isolate which atoms or molecules that they leave in there after using after creating a vacuum? How are they able to isolate what exactly particular? I just, that's so wild.
I don't know all the answers, but I'll tell you, I will offer you this. If you'd like, I can get you a tour of quantum computers and go march through that. So let's do that.
The answer is yes, absolutely.
That's fun.
That'd be great. I'll grab your number after this. But okay, so let's theoretically, you run the gauntlet. You are now governor of Colorado. Now what? What would you do as governor of Colorado that you aren't in a position right now to be able to do?
Sure. So first of all, on a very basic level, transform, this is based on the conversation we just had, transform the operation of government from one of micromanaging the people, managing the people's behavior, to providing the services that government ought to be entrusted to provide. So let's focus our treasure on things like keeping our roads, our bridges smooth and well done. There are some things that
That sounds like a really extreme view.
yeah,
No, okay.
yeah. And any bills that would come across my desk that says we're going to tell parents how to parent their kid, or we're going to tell schools thou shalt be teaching these things, because that is an inappropriate role of the legislature. It says so right in our state constitution. Those get vetoed. This wouldn't make it past my desk. But my goal would be to run the government, the state government, leanly and only constitutionally, but in a way that makes everybody go, that's good. That's smart. I'll give you one example. We run prisons. In fact, most of the prisons in Colorado, I think, are in my district. I represent 8 counties, and one of those is Fremont County, where Supermax is, and Territorial Prison. That's like what Canyon City does in Florence. That's their industry down there is prisons. What was just demonstrated to me recently, there's a scientist who's back in, I believe she's in New Jersey. She's very impressive, and she has a heart for people who suffer dyslexia. Okay. And she has these games and so on that she has developed for children to get beyond that, or to correct for that and so on in their lives. And out of curiosity, she did some survey studies, some very measured formal studies of prisoners, and found that people who are incarcerated, have something like a 40% of them have dyslexia.
Really?
Some very high degree.
So it's not 40% higher than the general population, it's 40% total.
Right.
Wow.
And I don't know what the natural percentage is in the general population.
It's probably not 40%.
But it ain't 40, yeah.
No.
So I sponsored her working with the Department of Corrections in Colorado. And so she's working with us now. And we're going to be doing tests with the prisoners or the inmates in Colorado. All that to say, let's see if we can find some cause and effect in here. What caused, is there something in this? There's obviously some correlation to where they've ended up in their adult lives and having dyslexia. So let's apply that back to the students, to younger age, and see if we can't correct some trajectory in people's lives, and keep them from ending up as an inmate and so on.
I wonder how much of that is a root issue, because now that I'm thinking about that, if that number is true, 40% have dyslexia in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be attributed as a root cause of a lot of crime. Because I mean, if you can't read very well, I mean that starts you on a whole lifetime of difficulty just right away. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that idea.
Well, I'm going to emphasize 4 things. One is the economy, because if we're doing well financially, if we're healthy financially, then we don't worry so much about affordable housing and the cost of groceries and all. If people can provide for themselves, then there is that fulfillment. Second, education. While I would like government to get out of education as much as possible, I find it very utilitarian, very useful to connect the industry with education. And so I do that now a lot. And the purpose of that, my goal in that, is to make education relevant. And so I've very deliberately got myself on the education committee for my first 6 years and befriended the presidents and chancellors and so on of our big universities, and trying to emphasize the relevance of what they're teaching the students to the industry around, to aerospace, to financial services, to the cable industry, and so on. And after a while, it starts to rub off. They go, wow, I don't have time for all the indoctrination nonsense. I've got to prepare these students for that employer.
Right.
At any rate, safety is another big deal. That's appropriate use of government to ensure that law enforcement can work with ICE. Right now, they're prevented from working with ICE. I've run bills to lift that restriction, and that gets killed, of course. But anyway, push for that.
I had Steve Reams in here a few weeks ago.
Oh, no kidding.
And he was talking to me about that. There's not much that local law enforcement can do, really.
True. That's true, because dumb state laws. Wildfires. I've been working on getting us more aircraft, which we do. We have 2 new helicopters, Black Hawk helicopters, that are made into Firehawk helicopters.
Okay.
We have some fixed wing aircraft now, and we have software made right here in the state by Lockheed Martin Space Systems that uses artificial intelligence to predict where fires are going to break out when. And we get the aircraft there when it's
What about
small.
preventative maintenance? Is there anything we can do on that front for wildfires?
Yes.
It's like
the
forest
mitigation.
maintenance?
Yes, absolutely. And I was when I first thinking of that idea, I'm going, why would we messing with what's natural? There's a burn cycle, there's so on, but someone used the term here to tend our garden, that's our garden. I'm like, oh, you know what? That's our commandment. That makes sense. So yes, the mitigation of that, and that is a whole big statewide effort, and I've gotten real heavily involved in that. And there's some real wisdom in how that is managed as well.
I would love to see the stats on that AI software that can kind of predict the fires, like the Lockheed Martin software. I wonder how accurate that is.
It's cool stuff.
That'd be amazing. Okay, so education or economy, education, safety, and there was a fourth one?
Yeah, taxes, property tax in particular. Recently, a couple years ago, our property values shot up like 45% on average across the state.
Wow, that's a big.
So our property taxes followed, right? Because that's in the formula. The formula is a tax rate, which is 6-point-something% that's set by the legislature. The mills that are assigned to your address, and the mills are what is associated with the special districts that you live in, your fire district, your library district, your hospital district, and so on. And then your property value, your real estate value, as the 3 primary variables in the formula, in the algebraic multiplication equation that determines what your property. So ask yourself this, because I have. If your property value shoots up 45%, does that mean that the library district needed 45% more money?
No.
No. If your property value dropped by 25%, would that mean that the fire district needed 25% less money?
No.
No. It is an inappropriate association. So I ran a bill to dissociate property value from that formula, and to instead baseline everybody's budgets, the fire districts, the library districts, and so on, the counties.
Yeah.
Baseline their budgets, and then allow them to grow a la Tabor by inflation and population.
Okay. So that way it'd be actually proportional growth.
Yeah, and it would be, they could count on them. It would be predictable and steady, and it would not shock the system. People that are paying, $3,000 every year in property tax, it wouldn't shoot up to $5,000. It would increment by inflation. But anyway, so I want to address those things. We need to do those smarter.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're about out of time here. First of all, I just want to say you're clearly a very intelligent man. I think Colorado would benefit tremendously from your leadership.
Thank you, Nate.
I have a lot of respect for you. Do you want to shout out social media, website, any final words here in the last minute or so here?
Are you kidding? Of course I do.
Well, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm easily found at markbaisley.com. So markbaisley.com. And everything's there.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll have to do it again one of these days. Thank you for tuning in to the Better Nate Than Ever podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week.